Hey guys, and welcome to another Patreon exclusive mixing tutorial video. Thank you so much for being a patron and also for taking some time out of your day to learn something from me, hopefully. Thank you for that trust. Let's take a look at my cover of... what's the damn song name? In Flux by After the Burial. Jesus, that's professional. Now this song has some great tones. Let's start in the beginning where we usually start, our master mix bus. Just the usual suspects, my mix bus compressor. Let's see what it's doing today. Hitting actually kind of hard at 3 decibels of gain reduction. Since this is a pretty heavy song, we can get away with some nice compression. Then the other usual suspect, which is my multi-band compressor. Again, for those that haven't heard me explain it yet, this does the same as the last compressor basically, but it acts in frequency dependent nodes. So you can see that the kick can compress independently here, the snare can compress independently here, and overall you can get some frequency dependent compression that will work differently with different material. This can help your mix sound nice and balanced. And then our usual limiter, ozone. Let's see how much we are, well, limiting. Some snare hits getting chopped off as hard as 7.5 decibels. That's our master mix bus chain. Let's go over this new drum sound I built. Not my best drum sound yet, but there's one thing I'm very proud of in it, is that it has very little processing. And I'll show you how I did there. So the components of this tone are Get Good Drums Invasion, layered with, and this is hard to see, layered with the Drumforge Andrew Wade one-shot pack. So Drumforge do these series of one-shot packs, which are basically one-shots of different kit parts, and they do them in a signature style with different producers. As soon as they released the Andrew Wade one, I bought it because I love Andrew Wade, and you love Andrew Wade if you like the tones of bands like Wage War, Attila. He does some very heavy stuff, and if I can have his drum one-shots, I am going to. So look these up, you might like them. What I did is create a simple not too processed sound with Invasion. That sounds a little something like this. So basically just the attack of the kick and snare and toms. Very clean, and then I layered it with the big Andrew Wade drum samples. It gets you a very original result, which I like. What it does that it's also good is that you don't have to over process the samples, because something like Get Good Drums is not raw, it's not fully unprocessed, but it needs a lot of work to get somewhere that's mix ready. They're very flexible, and these one-shots are basically mix ready. So by blending the two of them together, you get the best of both worlds, the realism of the multi-samples and the consistency of the one-shot samples. In case you are wondering, I will explain how I get them to play from the same MIDI file, which I have gotten some questions from. Basically, I program everything on the same MIDI track, which you guys get if you're at platinum level Patreon. And what I then do is route this same MIDI file to different tracks. So this track is called Drum MIDI, and if I open its routing, which is here, this little button that says route, it's going to many different places. One of them is of course track 4, Contact, which has Get Good Drums. So this MIDI is being sent to Get Good Drums already, which is good. And then I am sending it to these gray tracks over here, where I have the one shots. The S stands for drum shots, which is how Drumforge calls them. Basically, I send the MIDI to something like drum shots kick, and then I do this Reaper plugin, which is the MIDI note filter, so that it receives all those MIDI notes, but only plays when you hear 36. Well, if this is kick, you can guess what 36 usually is on my MIDIs. It's the kick. You can, oh, I can't point with the finger. Up here, when I look here, now I'm gonna put the mouse down there, look up, it's the 36 note. God, my English is great today. So basically I send the whole MIDI to this track, and then this plugin says you will only play when you hear 36, which is C1. And then I use another Reaper plugin, which is Resamplomatic 5000, which is great for loading your own samples. You've guessed it. Especially one-shot samples are very easy to put in and just play. So yeah, this MIDI sends to these one-shot tracks. I'll play them by themselves because they sound pretty funny and stupid. And it also sends to Contact for the Get Good Drums cymbals and shells too. So what about the processing? I have the Get Good Drums kick next to the one-shot kick, the Get Good Drums snare next to the one-shot snare, and the Get Good Drums toms next to the one-shot toms. As you can see, the one-shots have no processing whatsoever on them, which is great. And the cymbals, very little too. So let's see. This is the Get Good Drums kick by itself. Nice and thin, and we only did this to it. All this is compression for attack, clipping for dynamic consistency, and EQ for more attack. That's all we did. Blended with the one shot, sounds like this. Very nice if you ask me. 3 plugins to get a kick sound. Snare, we got it from this to this. We only clipped it. That's all I wanted. I wanted the snare to be as real and unprocessed as possible so that I could blend with the big one shot. This is a snare alone and with the one shot. Hell yeah, this makes me happy. What about toms? All we did was, again, compression, but this time it wasn't for attack. It was to get some more sustain, let's say. Yeah, very little compression. And some EQ for less mid-range. Blended with the one-shots. And that's the tom sound. Not too happy with it, but for 2 plugins, pretty happy. Let's see about the cymbals. Everything that's not one-shots or shells is going through this. Our SSL EQ friend is filtering the low end beneath 80. Getting rid of 4K. This one's a big one. I'll turn it on and off for you to hear. Making the cymbals a lot easier to hear. Getting rid of some 800 and boosting some 8K, not too much. Then this little notch at 3K where some of the cymbals were stupid. Let's hear that. Goodbye. What is this? So the hi-hat and overhead track are getting their lows removed because the hi-hat and cymbals don't have bass on them, or they shouldn't at least. And further getting this high mid-range area tamed. I'll boost it so you can see what I was going after. That's the stuff I didn't want to hear. The rooms only have compression so that the snare in them can get a little bit more sustain. If I turn them off, the snare is just a peak. By turning the compression on, the peak is turned down so that the sustain can be turned up. Then everything goes through the drum bus where we have SSL saturation. This SSL plugin, for those that don't know yet, emulates a real board, and a real SSL board not only does it have the EQ, of course, and the compressor, but it also has some distortion that always was applied either if you wanted it or not. And this emulates it very well. You can push it to make it sound extra distorted and beefy. And it's a really nice saturator, this little knob over here. Then it's going into an EQ. That's very important in shaping the sound of the drums. Basically going for a smiley face EQ. I'll turn it on and off so you can hear. No thumbs up for you. Only drums, please. As soon as I turn it on, there's more low end and there's more high end. Not too fancy, but very important. A clipper to get the snare under control. This clipper is very visual, so you'll be able to see the snare peak being cut off here. This is so that the compressor that comes after has to work a little bit less on the snare and more on the kick and toms. You can still see it going hard on the snare, but if I turn off the clipper, it goes way harder. Well, actually not too much. Maybe I should rethink this. Still sounds good though, that's what matters. In this EQ, getting rid of anything beneath 35 Hz, mainly just some kick sub-frequencies that come from the one shot actually. And that's a drum sound with a total of maybe 10, 15 plugins. Pretty cool. The lesson here is try experimenting with one-shot samples. By themselves, they will sound stupid. But if you layer them with real drums or multi-sample drums, you may get a result that you're very happy with. Let's move on to bass. And bass is just as minimalistic as the drums. There is 2 plugins on bass, which is pretty funny. This is how the DI sounds. Fresh strings, very important in any bass tone. The first plugin is Joel 1SX Bus Glue Bass. And for those of you who don't know yet, this is an all-in-one bass processor where you have a way to process the top end of the bass and the bottom end of the bass and compress them individually. So the bottom end of the bass here is fully compressed, and the top end, well, the top end too. And since it's a one-stop shop for bass tone, of course it has inbuilt distortions. Let's listen to them. I thought distortion A fit this mix better, so I went with it. Basically, this one plugin turns your bass from this into this. Almost mix ready, and I love that in these tools. Then into our SSL EQ friend, which is very importantly shaping the mid-range by boosting 1.5K and filtering the super highs over 7K. This is a big difference. Let's do our thumbs up, thumbs down AB. I'll start with it off. You can hear it instantly become grindier as soon as I turn the EQ on. Some of you might think, well, but you're taking high end away. How does it sound grindier? Sometimes the grind you're looking for isn't in the high end, it's in the mid range. Watch me boost this. That's a bass with a shit ton of attack if you ask me, and it's all in the mid range. None of this 6K, 8K shit. Like 1.5K, I got all the attack I need. So pay attention to your 1K and 2K region on your bass to get the attack. And those are the 2 plugins that made the bass tone. Very cool. What about these guitars? Let's go over the chain on these guitars. I'll do it this way. The amp is Toneforge Jason Richardson. And here's what it sounds like by itself. Pretty cool, but very different from what you just heard. Before it, I have these 2 tools. I have our infamous green booster pedal. This one is free, by the way. If you want to check out the TSC 808, you can try it. It's free. What it does is it boosts the high end of the guitar and the volume of the guitar going into the amp to make it sound less bassy and more tight. Let's do our AB. You can instantly hear more attack. And to make that even more extreme, I put it first through this and then through this EQ, where I took off some woofy mid-range at 300. Now it sounds really nice and spiky because the high mid-range can get through without the stupid bass to woof all over it. I'm going to boost it and you'll see what I mean. This is what you don't want to hear. So I'm going from this to this into the amp. The post EQ on the amp is mostly this big boost at 2.5 kilohertz and taking some out at 240. The cab is the stock cab with the stock mic, in case you're wondering. Then going into this SSL EQ, let's see what it's doing. Oops. Here's another example of boosting mid-range instead of boosting... Oh, I'm boosting high-end too, but you'll see what I mean. By itself, it may sound worse, but in the mix, the guitar instantly becomes more present. I really like this. So I am boosting the 7K region, which is high-end, admittedly, yes. And I'm actually very strategically taking off 4.8K. You want to hear what this sounds like? Let's go. This frequency was so loud that it was crapping all over my good mid-range. As soon as I take it off, the guitar will actually sound a bit more mid-rangey. Crazy, right? The lesson here is pay attention to what frequencies are masking other frequencies. Then I am removing a low mid-range at 450 Hertz. Then into another EQ, taking care of some stupid mid-range as well. This and this. This is that same one, so 4.8K. God, did that sound bad. Jesus. Then into some compression, not too much. It just hits on the palm mutes. Nice. And then into an EQ to remove the super lows and a little annoying thing at 6.3. Let's hear it. Well, now that I'm boosting it, I'm actually liking it, so I'll put it at 0. And yeah, that's most of the processing. This little lead tone is only 2 plugins too. ToneForge Jason Richardson in the lead amplifier with no lows, no mids, mostly treble, 0 presence. Turn on the delay on it and the reverb on it to get some nice width and length. And in the EQ, getting rid of bass frequencies and boosting mid-range at 1.5K. You know I love that 1.5. This EQ again, getting rid of the stupid 4.8 in ToneForge Jason Richardson, which I just learned. ToneForge Jason Richardson has a ton of this, and it's being my enemy in recreating after the burial tones, because they're way more rich in mid-range before 4.8. And this, I'll just put it at 0 and you'll hear. Just sounds spiky and ugly. And then filtering anything over 8.6K and under 150. For your lead tones, you always want to, not always, but you usually want to put these filters in place, or else it just sounds really wide spectrum, which should be your rhythm guitars. and the lid guitars are filtered so that they fit into their own space. Compare this to this. This one is just a little bit much more controlled to poke through the rhythm. That's it, guys. The explosions, all they have is a filter at 40 hertz to not blow up my car speakers, and a filter at 3 kilohertz so I don't hear all the glass. This is a pretty cool explosion, but it's fuck full of glass and it's distracting sometimes. Listen to it. Here it sounds plain retarded. If I filter it, you only hear it a bit. What else? I can explain you how to get this cool effect in the breakdown and how I built it. So what I did here, let's listen to it alone. Basically, I grabbed a snare room sample. Oh boy, I don't know how to get to it. I got this same room sample that was from the drum shots so that it matched my snare room sound. And what I did was reverse it and add a, what is this called? A fade in. This is pretty cool, but with a fade sounds way more natural. And this is your usual bass drop, whichever one you want. Put the snare reverse before the snare, and after the snare, you put the bass drop, and you get this. Very cool. All right, guys. Thanks for watching this mix tutorial and for being a patron. And I will see you in the next one. Take care.